So I won't say that there was like a point in time where I had a realization. My parents, my father was military, my mom's Jamaican, and they raised us to be leaders because they were leaders. So it was just the attitude and the energy in our household. We were expected to do the best we could at all times. They were very supportive and always had all the resource for learning and engaging in our wildest dreams and imagination. So we were just raised in a certain way that was organic to be somebody who was comfortable leading or directing. So it was not one point in time, I don't think. So, okay, when I first read the question, it really kind of more pointed to childhood, but my favorite recollection of leadership was when I was in basic training. And when I graduated high school, I had won a scholarship to CCAD for a full 4 years. And it wasn't until my senior year that people began addressing that they thought having an art degree was pretty much a wasted time. So I didn't have a plan B. And I was a little depressed, a little overwhelmed, because I really had not thought of being anything but an artist. Well, earlier on, maybe a scientist and some things like that, but I ended up I ended up enlisting in the military. I leave for basic training, and the drill sergeants, as soon as you get off of the bus, they take on that profile where they're yelling and barking at you and standing over you, and it made me giggle. I was raised in a military family, so I already knew it was pretty much, mostly performance, and I knew they weren't going to hurt anybody, and it made me giggle. So when I giggled, they instructed me to get down and give them push-ups. And so from my first few minutes there, I was always in the front leaning prone position, is what they call it, knocking out push-ups. So pretty quickly, I learned that the limits that I thought I had didn't exist, because no matter how many times they made me get down and do push-ups, I was able to complete the task. And I started falling in love with basic training. I started falling in love with pushing the boundaries, and I started falling in love with the unknown spaces of my own body and my just expectations for myself. And before basic training was over, I was the squad leader. I went from the girl that giggled every time they barked to the one that stood to the right of them. In all of the formations, I became the squad leader because they pushed every boundary I had, and I was greedy for more. I learned how to fire an M16, put it together, take it apart. I am a sharpshooter. I've set off claymore mines. I flipped jeeps on convoys and driven all the way up to a deuce and a half. Military vehicles, things that I never would have even thought of doing. And my MOS had nothing to do with anything we did in basic training, but all soldiers are taught the same basic skills, and I loved it. And the fact that I rose to the top of even that forum just helped confirm that all my life I had been given the basic skills necessary to lead, even in an environment that was totally foreign to me. I still came out that enlisted person who was turned into the squad leader. So that's my favorite story of leadership, I think. It always starts with my parents. I won't say my parents were perfect people, but they were perfect parents. They were perfect for me. Our union was very, very close. We lost my mom about this time last year, and my dad passed in 2008. And because both of them were from different places, like I said, Mom Jamaica, Dad New York, And we traveled a lot because Dad was also in the military. I was raised in England. We've always been a very close family unit because it was us. You know, there was nobody else that really was always there except us. So they're my first heroes and the people that I'm most drawn to speak of. But on a day-to-day basis, the people that I see pushing past any and every challenge, those are my continuous ongoing heroes. I run into them a lot here in this building, and without exchanging words, you can read their body language. You can just read so much about them, and you know that they're up against the odds, and no matter what, they keep pushing forward. Those are the people that impress me constantly. And those are my everyday heroes. And those are the ones that touch my heart and keep me motivated. Because I know so many circumstances are harder than, more challenging than anything I've experienced. And I've been through some things. But you can just read on somebody that they're going to give it all they've got, no matter what the odds are against them. And that's who I admire the most. Collecting. I like collecting artifacts. I collect something that is, well, I don't know that I coined this phrase. I call them derogatories. Blackface, music, record covers. I collect pickaninnies with the exaggerated, deep ebony skin and the big bright lips and the big white eyes. I've got all the little black boys holding the watermelons and that type of art in my home. And I've got a set of slave shackles, and the inscription on the slave shackles reads, Negro, woman, or child. So I have quite a few things from that type of collection. And then I also collect art by local artists. I'm up to, I think, 12 or 13 local artists in my collection right now. That's probably the thing that if I had to say that, like for some people it's shoes, for some it's, I don't know, just different things. Collecting art would be that thing that can get me in trouble. I would even consider buying a larger home just to have more wall space, to have more art. Not that I'm planning that or anything, but I could see me doing that because I'm getting close to running out of space and that anxiety is setting in. And it's like, okay, we'll just switch to three-dimensional art and start filling up the shelves. But yeah, I like collecting art and derogatories. I've never hated anybody. And when I've been in conversations, with groups, talking with the girls or whatever, and I bring that up, people look at me really strange. But I've never actually felt hate for any person ever in my life. I'm not sure I've felt hate for anything. There are things that I avoid and things that I will remove from my life. But I've never felt what it is that I translate when I hear people talk about hate. I've never felt that. And that's hard for some people to understand. I didn't realize I didn't have it until I heard other people describe what they were feeling or thinking, or I have no idea. Could be most of my childhood, I had a lot of exposure, and I was able to immerse in a lot of different cultures, a lot of different just ways of life. So I probably don't have as many solid expectations of how somebody has to be, or they're supposed to be, or if you're not doing it this way, you're not doing it right. Could be that, along with my spiritual core. I don't know. I do know that, and it's surprising it didn't work this time. I often tell people I don't like cartoons either. I can't stand cartoons. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago somebody finally went, well, why? And I had an answer. And I had never thought before of why. But when they asked, and nobody had asked, they were just always surprised that I didn't like cartoons. And when they said why, I immediately offered the answer because when I was a child, I preferred to be outside. And the only time I watched cartoons is if the weather were bad and Mom made me stay in. So to me, watching cartoons was always a little depressing because I'm staring out the window and I really want to be outside. I'm very much of an outdoor person. I didn't realize there was a reason. I just always thought I hated cartoons. So it didn't work this time when you asked me why. Because I don't think that I've really hit on an answer that really answers why. I just know I've never felt it. That's all I know for certain. In England, there was Freddie Mobley. Then when we moved to right outside of Tallahassee, Debbie Starnes, and then there was a young girl named Renee Bergenheyer. But they've all moved on. The thing that was probably the oddest best friend was an inanimate object, and it came from England back to the States with us. Actually, my parents had to ship to England because I was born here in Columbus, Ohio. Back up. My parents met in England when they were pregnant with me. Dad took a TDY here to Columbus, Ohio. We were here for a year and then we went back to England. So during that time, you know, I said I was born here, but my parents had their car come over. They bought the 57 Chevy here, took it back to England with us. And then when we returned to the States, it came back with us. And I was 6 years old then. And most of my pictures as a child, I'm sitting in that car playing in the car. When they came out with that show, My Mother the Car, I kind of related. It wasn't a person for me, but it was like my playground. No matter where I lived, no matter what continent I was on, that car had been there. And so it was extremely familiar to me. And I can just remember all sorts of imaginary things that I would just have these spaceships, you know, just all sorts of things, until I started meeting the kids in the neighborhood, because there's always like a day or two when you're unpacking that you don't actually get out and play. But because we always lived on Air Force bases, it wasn't hard to make friends. Everybody else had the same experience I had, and we were used to just whoever was next door, that's who you play with. But yeah, that car, that darn car. I have to find a picture and send it to Miss Rita, because it's from the early 60s, and it's just a very interesting picture of me in this darn 57 Chevy. Visual arts, oh, that's so hard though, because I also love dance, I love music. When I begin to delve in art again, it'll be metal. It'll be sculptural, three-dimensional. The largest and most, the part of my collection that I'm most engaged with right now is just two-dimensional, you know, paintings. My favorite ice cream is gooey butter cake from Jenny's. It's amazing. If you haven't tried it, please try it. It's the best.
Gooey butter cake.
Gooey butter cake. And I had never had an actual, because there is a cake that's literally a gooey butter cake. And I found it once. And it was after I tried the ice cream, because I was reading the ingredients to figure out why is this so delicious. And it literally has pieces of the gooey butter cake in it. And I found one, it was at one of the grocery stores, and it was amazing, and I went back to find it again, and I've not found it since. I tried to bake a gooey butter cake at home, and it was nowhere as good as what's in the ice cream, or what's it. So I'm, if anybody's watching this and you make gooey butter cake, hit me up. Gooey butter cake, I'm telling you. I'm gonna read a quote, okay? and it's by Johann Wolfgang van Gogh, and he was alive between 1749 and 1832. So this is my favorite quote. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issue from the one decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings of material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, magic, and power in it. Begin it now. So that's my favorite. And it has actually lived out my entire life. And I truly believe that once you begin, your resource shows up. You have to, it's a bit of faith, it's a bit of universe, it's a bit of boldness. So it came from a kid's movie. And Dory said it, just keep swimming, no matter what. The question was asked of Dory, what do you do if you end up in the belly of the whale? And she said, you just keep swimming. And that's my life mantra, no matter what happens, just keep swimming. Don't stop now, just keep swimming. The 15-year-old me was already a survivor. At the age of 14, I was molested. But my choice at the time was to attempt to manage whatever came next on my own. I didn't want to tell anybody what happened. I don't think I wasn't in denial. I just believed it was something I had to fix. And so if I could go back and talk to my 15-year-old self, it would be open your mouth, tell somebody, let somebody in, let somebody help. It's not yours to fix. So I learned recently, I've learned a lot of things recently, that both myself and my sister are what are referred to as rainbow babies. And what that has come to mean is a child that survives for parents who have had multiple miscarriages or stillbirths. So before I was born, there were 3. There were 2 after me, and my sister would have been a twin. So out of all those pregnancies, just my sister and I survived. I think maybe, I don't know, my parents may have been perfect parents if all had survived, but sometimes I sometimes think that since they had to wait so long and go through so much to have children, that it just brought about an extra layer of just parenting love in them. They were really, really amazing parents and people. So Dad was from the Bronx, grew up in New York, one of 3 sons. His mother died when he was quite young. He was raised by his grandmother and his father. My mother was born and raised in Montego Bay, Jamaica, one of 10 children, well actually 12 children. There was 1 boy and 1 girl that didn't live. So they were raised 5 boys, 5 girls. Both my parents were in England at the same time. They met there. Mom was going to nursing school and Dad was there working with re-educating the Tuskegee Airmen that had formerly been pilots for new careers through this new opportunity that had opened up for what they called colored soldiers then. That's also how and why we ended up coming to Columbus, Ohio for the year when I was born. Mom was about 6 months pregnant with me when they got here to Ohio, and they lived off of East Broad Street. They didn't move to Lockbourne Air Force Base yet. They lived off of East Broad Street, Broad and 22nd. And then when I was about 9 months old, we returned to England, and I spent my first 6 years there. After we left England, I moved to Florida for about a year. After Florida, we went to Michigan. after Michigan back to Ohio. So I was near middle school when we got back to Ohio. When I was 12 years old, my parents finally had another successful birth, and I finally had a little sister, so now I'm a sibling, and life was perfect. Life was great. Went to Southmore Middle School, Eastmoor High School, and also to Marion-Franklin. I ended up at Marion-Franklin for my senior year. I took art classes all the way through school. Part of my healing, part of the way I dealt with the previous molestation was through art. Art therapy, I called it. And that's where I put all my feelings in what I created. So I literally did not have plan B. When people started suggesting to me that it was not a good idea to take 4 years out of my youth to attempt a degree that would not create a livelihood. So that's the military. I was attending OSU for a summer. It was right after high school, and I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do, so I decided to sign up for one class prior to fall session, and because a lot of people were suggesting I would do well in law school, that I should be an attorney. So I signed up for Poli-Sci 101. And it was summer school, and it's a whole different environment when you take classes at OSU during the summer. And a lot of the support services, if you aren't already aware of them, you don't know. Counselors aren't generally on staff. It's just a whole different reason that they have. It's either somebody trying to catch up or trying to get ahead. But it's not a good place for a freshman to jump in. So they kept talking about John Locke, and I had no idea who John Locke was yet. And nobody else in the class was writing, and I'm trying to write every single word. And it was 2 TAs, didn't even have a professor. It was, the TAs teaching over the summer. And I'm trying to write everything down, and I'm feeling just lost. And I'm like, wow, maybe, college isn't for me. And I go to walk home, and my parents lived on the south side of Columbus, and I'm walking from OSU campus, and as I'm walking south on High Street, I swear to goodness, I remember it like a really horrible movie. Some guy goes, "Psst, come here, little girl." And he probably didn't say it like that, but that's how I remember it, and it was a recruiter. Like, what are you doing? Can I talk to you for a while? Might I interest you in one of the armed services? Real great guy, but when I look back, what they recruited me for was, I did love basic training, absolutely loved basic training. My MOS was Cryptographic Special Identification Technique Operator. I scored extremely high in the entrance exams, and I had a top secret clearance, had to go through all that. But then once I actually began the position, it wasn't for me. The exposés that they did were not kind. Somehow I was buffered through the whole experience. It never felt bad. It never brought about regret or fear, or if anything, it felt like people were telling my testimony over and over and over. And as we all know now, I won, and the individuals who had meant the offer for harm, they lost. I was the only one on that ballot they put together that did win the office, and here recently I won re-election. My plans going forward with the office, within weeks or months of being exposed to what goes on some level here in the Treasurer's office, the collection of delinquent taxes oftentimes results excuse me, in people losing their homes. A lot of people are used to mortgage foreclosure, and that's generally where the focus is. I think it's horrible that you can pay off a home, and as a result of not being able to afford the property taxes, you can lose your home. So that's been a goal and a focus for the last 3 years, and within the last few months it has begun to fall in place. We kicked off a charitable fund at Columbus Foundation. It's called the Starfish Fund, and we're collecting donations and contributions to help fund the tax debt for individuals that have fallen on hard times. It could be a catastrophic incident. It could, and this was even before COVID that we thought of it, but now with COVID, you know, there's so many things that happen out of people's control that puts them in that domino category that before you know it, the debt has become so large that you can't regroup. We have put together a program to align people with services to help stabilize their households, to get people back on their feet, and to make sure in that time while we're helping them reestablish themselves that they don't lose their home because of the tax debt. So we're extremely excited about that and encouraged at the thought that we're going to be able to help stabilize homes and people. Everything else in your life, you have to be centralized somewhere. I mean, everything revolves around your safety and being able to feel as if you have a place you belong. So to me, it's a big deal.